So welcome everyone. Uh, Thank you so much for being here. I do have just a few housekeeping announcements and then I will kick it on over to our presenter today. So just a few things. Thank you for joining us. If you could go ahead and turn off your camera and have on mute so that we can make sure all the bandwidth that we have is going for our presentation. If anyone is needing closed captioning, that is available. If you click on the little more buttons, and then you're going to click show subtitle, and you'll be able to see the closed captioning there. And then lastly, I'm going to introduce you to Sebastian. He is from the Texas Blue Jay Project, and he's going to be presenting today. If you have any questions during the presentation today, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I will be answering those. And Miranda, I see you've got some background noise. I'm about to put myself on mute and it'll just be Sebastian. So hopefully that'll help. So y'all have a wonderful time and thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Texas Children in Nature, for having me as a presenter for this year's Texas Children in Nature Summit. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending my birding presentation about birding in the Barrio, how to spark a love of birding among young minorities. For this talk, I plan to share some of my experiences I have gone through as a young Hispanic birder that I hope can spark some ideas to help assist you with reaching young minorities' interest into birding. I will also share some ideas and plans that have worked for the Texas Blue Jay Project in bringing more minorities into birding. By the end of this talk, I hope that it inspires you and motivates you in trying some of these new ideas and suggestions into your nature organizations, communities, and schools. I hope you are all excited to learn some new ideas how to involve more minorities into birding. So let's get started. This is an overview of what I plan to discuss in this presentation. First, I will start with a short bio introduction of how I became a young birder and some obstacles I had to overcome as a young Hispanic birder in my birding community. Secondly, I will give a brief mission statement of what the Texas Blue Jay Project is all about and why I started this birding movement. Thirdly, I will explain the Texas Blue Jay Project Bird Book Drive and how you can get one started in your community and schools. And lastly, I will provide some ideas and suggestions on how to gradually introduce birding to minority youth and some tools and resource links with some arts and crafts ideas towards the end of this presentation. I didn't have any relatives or friends that were birders. My parents' knowledge span of birds was non-existent, except them able to identify a red cardinal, doves, and grackles. Grackles they recognized because they were the ones who always pooped on their cars. Every Hispanic family has at least one abuela who owns several caged birds like parakeets or cockatiels. I remembered when I was little, I would visit my grandparents at their house and I could hear the loud squawking caged birds once I entered their house. I always looked forward to it. In some Hispanic family generations, there were some superstitions about birds. For instance, my grandpa told me that his grandpa used to tell him, when you see a red cardinal, it brings you good luck. He couldn't explain why it was good luck, just that it was something he was taught as a young boy. My great-grandmother told me she was taught since she was little by her parents that hearing or seeing an owl was bad luck. It meant that someone in your family or close to you was going to die. Who knows if these avian stories or legends had an impact and why there are a few Hispanics interested in birding. Or it could be that learning about birds and bird watching was never introduced to minorities at their elementary and middle schools. growing up. When my parents were young students in their school years, they never had a classroom topic about birds and bird watching. It wasn't until I got into birding that they were aware that there was a birding community. You mean there are people who get up at 6 in the morning just to go look at birds? It was a new world for my parents and me to understand as well. When you go to any city or state park, you will notice that there are several Hispanic families enjoying the outdoors. They are either having a picnic with their families, or fishing, riding a bike, playing sports, or swimming, but not bird watching. Why? I hope to explain more about this topic later on in my presentation. So, getting back to how I became a young birder. At the age of 7, I taught myself about birds by studying an Audubon bird book. One day, when my mom and I were at a local bookstore, I came across this huge bird book that it drew my attention. While my mom was looking around at the bookstore, I eagerly sat down on the floor and opened the book that was filled with beautiful bird photos. I couldn't believe that there existed beautiful birds like this in the world. All I knew was that I had to convince my mom to buy it for me. Luckily, I was able to convince her. I would read this book day and night. I was so drawn to this book that I wanted to learn more and more about birds. I remembered my mom catching me staying up late at night reading this book. In less than a month, I had finished reading the book and I had memorized it as well. I wanted to continue learning more about birds. So my parents built me a small home library full of bird books. With all this new information about birds and bird watching, I was so eager to get outdoors and practice my bird watching skills. When I started bird watching, it wasn't as easy. It seemed easier to learn about bird watching in a book than practicing it in real life. I struggled in the beginning with my birding identification skills. I can understand why some youth and adults find bird watching difficult and don't try it again. Bird watching can be challenging. This is why it's so important to have birding mentors for the youth, especially among minorities. There are very few birders and ornithologists that are minorities. When I was very young, I would have loved to have a birding mentor. It wasn't until I was in high school that I was blessed to find a birding mentor, Dr. Keith Arnold. I learned so much from him that I would have never learned from reading a book. I strongly encourage every birder to take the initiative to become a birding mentor to the youth, especially those from social disadvantages. There are so many kids out there searching for birding mentors, just like how I was. The fact that I didn't have a birding mentor in the earlier days of my birding journey, it didn't stop me from learning more about bird watching. I learned a lot from my birding identification mistakes. With these new birding experiences and knowledge skills, I was able to excel in my birding identification. Every year, I learned more and more new birding tips from watching other birders, and I improved as a birder. I remembered when I was a young kid, my mom started taking me to city parks so I can bird watch. I never saw any birders that were minorities, not even any young birders. Watching the older birders bird, I would hear them pishing. This was the first time I became aware of pishing to call out the birds. When my interest in birding became more serious, I needed to get a pair of binoculars. A good pair of binoculars can be very pricey. My parents weren't sure if I was going through a phase with birding like I did with Legos. They didn't want to spend a lot of money on a pair of binoculars if I was only going to use them for a little bit. So they ended up buying me a pair of $10 binoculars. I never used them because I couldn't see birds well in them. So for 1 year, I birded by ear and by sight. When my parents finally realized I was serious about birding, they bought me a decent pair of binoculars. It took me about a year to get used to them. The next thing I needed was a bird field guidebook. My dad bought me a used, outdated Peterson bird field guide book. It was so old and outdated that some of the birds in the book weren't named the same anymore. There were even a few birds in the book that were extinct. I started my birding journey from humble beginnings and learned a lot from every experience and disadvantages that I had to overcome. I appreciate my parents for all their support and financial sacrifices that they did for me in supporting my birding passion. When I became a teenager, I found out about young birders' summer camps. I have never attended one. They were too expensive for my parents to afford for me to attend. Some of these young birders' summer camps start from $1,000 to $4,000, sometimes even more depending on the location. Even though some of these well-known young birders' summer camps offer a few scholarships, they are highly selective. Birding is an outdoor activity or hobby. Just like any other activity or hobby, the difference is that with birding, it's not as much recognized in our society as an outdoor activity or hobby compared to other outdoor activities like fishing. The lack of exposure of bird watching is not prominent in our communities. People think that bird watching is for older adults and senior citizens. All the photos you see in the media, and especially in commercials of bird watchers, are older adults and senior citizens. We need more photos of minority children and teens bird watching in social media and publications to increase the diversity in the birding community. I applaud the organizations that have already started this new promotion of minority birders in birdwatching. We have to continue until we can have every young person, especially minorities, say and believe that birding is for all. This is why I am passionate about teaching everyone, especially minorities and youth from socioeconomic disadvantages, about birds and bird watching. I believe that one person can make a difference. This birding passion to teach people about birds began at the age of 9. I wanted to share everything I knew about birds to my community and friends to make them more aware of the beautiful birds around us. I find joy in sharing and teaching others about birds. At 9 years old, I started co-leading and leading bird walks at several community events and schools. At the age of 12, I was honored to be awarded with a Children in Nature Award for teaching my community about birds. In 2018, I was recognized by the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center as the first young avian advocate for teaching my community and around Texas about birds and bird watching through my Texas Blue Jay Project, bird presentations, and bird walks. I hope that some of these things I have shared about my earlier birding journey can spark an idea in you to get kids more into birding. Now let's learn why I started the Texas Blue Jay Project and the work ahead in getting non-Texas birders into becoming Texas birders. In June 2017, I started the Texas Blue Jay Project to encourage more Texans to explore birds and bird watching in their backyards, city, and state parks. I especially focused on minorities and socioeconomically disadvantaged youth. I started by teaching birds at several disadvantaged schools and schools that lacked a nature program. I would give birding presentations teaching them about their backyard birds and birding basics. I would also hand out resources for them to get started into birding. I always ended the talk with a bird walk around their school campus. For majority of the students, this was their first time ever attending a bird walk. This was also their first time they ever learned about their backyard birds. The schools and communities the Texas Blue Jay Project focuses on are the schools and communities that get neglected, the forgotten schools, where there isn't a safe park for them to go birding, or where bird watching is totally new to them, to make them advocates for their city parks, to make their parks safer and provide proper working playgrounds and safe and clean trails. I want to open their world to something new and exciting, birding. Birding can be done everywhere, even in their backyards, tiny or large. I teach them of what types of bird feeders to put out to attract certain birds and the importance of bird conservation, the importance of not releasing balloons into the air. It's dangerous to birds and all wildlife for entire environment. It's our duty to protect these beautiful creatures. With constant persistence and hard work, we can teach our youth we can all make a difference in saving our environment. At every Texas Blue Jay Project event that was held, we had a Texas Blue Jay Project pledge for Texans of all ages to sign and pledge to explore birds and bird watching in their backyards, city, and state parks. I was able to collect over 2,500 signatures. All these Texans that signed have never looked up at the birds in their backyard or even tried bird watching. This was a very special moment for me to see them get excited pledging, especially as a family, to explore the birds in their backyards. The Texas Blue Jay Project continues in teaching birding to disadvantaged schools around the state of Texas. Last year, I was excited in introducing birding to young minorities and their families in Laredo, Texas, and helped assist a middle school in Laredo to start their Young Birders Club bird book library. The Texas Blue Jay Project teaches as well in community libraries to reach non-birders and youth from social economic disadvantages. I will also have birding presentations at city parks for the community to learn more about birds. The Texas Blue Jay Project makes an effort to be present at community events to help spread the word of birding and bird conservation. These are the topics I discuss for the Texas Blue Jay Project presentations. I usually present a PowerPoint presentation if the facility is not equipped with having PowerPoint presentations. I will bring photographs and a poster board to explain to them the birds. I make bird calls which seem to be a big hit with people, especially the kids. It makes it more entertaining. I will discuss backyard birds and basic birding skills, bird conservation, for example, planting native plants, and how to start a young birders club in their schools or communities. If they already know about backyard birds and basic birding, I will teach them particular bird families like owls and other families. The Texas Blue Jay Project also focuses on families, especially minority families, to experience their first bird walks. This brings me so much joy that after their bird walks, the families that attended the Texas Blue Jay Project bird walks want to learn more about birds. To hear them say afterwards that birding is cool, my work here is done. Birding can easily become a popular outdoor activity, especially among families. Birding brings families together, and I know it does for my family and other young birders that I have met. I remembered when I first started the Travis Audubon Society Young Birders Club in 2015, I had a family attend regularly at every Young Birders Club meeting. This family had 3 young daughters, and the mom struggled to find an outdoor activity that her kids could all like and get along. She one day called my mom and shared her experience of seeing her daughters working together happily, trying to see the birds in their backyard, and the excitement she said her daughters had brought tears and happiness. She wanted to thank my mom and I for starting the Young Birders Club. The Texas Blue Jay Project brings family-friendly bird walks to those that wouldn't drive across town for a bird walk. I started the bird walks around 8:30 a.m. or 9 a.m. to bring in more families. Not everyone will wake up early to attend a bird walk, especially drive across town. I make sure the bird walks are close to them. Time and distance plays a big role on how many attendees you'll have at your bird walk. The Texas Blue Jay Project provides free bird walks and free bird presentations for family bird walks, young adult bird walks, and adult bird walks. I had mentioned in the early beginnings of my birding journey, I struggled for about a year using binoculars. That's why it's so important for me to teach youth how to use binoculars, especially with very active birds like warblers. They are tricky to keep your binoculars on them. When the Texas Blue Jay Project hosts a table at a school or community event, these are some things that we do. Birding ID signs, teaching them how to easily identify birds by using cutout bird photos. Bird puppets. Bird puppets are a fun way to introduce backyard birds to preschool to second grade students. Bird calls and bird sound games. I make bird calls to help the kids become familiar with the sounds of the local birds. They also enjoy trying to make them too. Bird watching table. Bird watching with binoculars. Birding by ear. I'll teach them how to identify the bird sounds by playing bird songs to them as an ID game. And then the fundamentals of binocular skills. I will teach them how to use binoculars. If you have not tried any of these ideas in your organization, I strongly encourage you to try them. Kids seem to really like these birding activity ideas. If you are a birder, then you know how pricey some bird field guidebooks are. My first bird field guidebook was the one my dad bought me. It was a used and very outdated Peterson bird field guidebook. I still learned a lot about birds with this book. When I would teach at local schools, I realized how many kids weren't able to have the resources or finances to purchase a bird field guidebook, not even a used, outdated bird book. So I thought, what a great idea to recycle used, outdated bird field guidebooks that birders don't use anymore and ask them to donate them to the Texas Blue Jay Project to give to youth minorities so they can start a birding club in their school or community. These are the goals of the Texas Blue Jay Project Used Bird Field Guidebook Drive: to assist low-income youth in the community, to assist schools to start a young birders club or nature club, and to bring bird watching classes to residential group homes for people with intellectual disabilities. The Texas Blue Jay Project started the Texas Blue Jay Project Used Bird Field Guidebook Drive in 2018 to 2019. Over 200 used bird books were collected for schools and communities to help assist them in starting a young birders club. I asked several local Audubon and birding groups if they would be interested in hosting a bird book drive box at their office. I am so grateful to my local Audubon and Texas birding groups for their support. Most important, so are the kids. I also had a few bird book drive boxes at local libraries in my community. To start a Texas Blue Jay Project Used Bird Book Drive, all you need is the support from your Audubon and birding groups, the support from local libraries, and schools. First, talk to the school you are interested in starting a young birders club, and make plans how to get it started. You will need bird books to start an ornithology library for them, and plenty of birding resources and handouts. If possible, binoculars and bird feeders. Ask other birders if they would be interested in mentoring these young students. Start an after-school young birders club for school or community. If planning an after-school young birders club is an issue for some of the students, Start a Young Birders Club that meets once a week during school hours. Talk to the school principal and science teachers to get approval. Plan several birding activities and educational programs for the Young Birders Club. If you are interested in starting a Texas Blue Jay project, use Bird Book Drive in your community. Please email me so I can send you more information at the Texas Blue Jay Project at gmail.com. The following are some questions to think about to help you plan in sparking a love of birding to young minorities. Why is it important to you to have minorities into birding? What does a diverse birding community look like? How do you imagine the birding community to look in 10 years? How often do you see kid and family birding programs and family and kid bird walks offered in your community? And what were your ups and downs in your past birding efforts for families and kids? These are some good questions to consider when making plans for your birding programs. With good planning and strategies on what your goals are, this can help make it into a successful birding program. What do you see when you view this photo? Imagine if you were not a birder and just enjoying the park and saw this. Would you be interested in trying bird watching, especially being a minority? I'm pretty sure you can find me in this photo with my parents. I was 8 years old when I attended this bird walk that was open to the community. I remembered wanting to see the birds they were seeing, but most of all, I wanted to feel included. To be part of the birding community, I didn't realize that this experience was going to have a major impact in my birding journey. It made me more determined to make sure birding is for everyone. Here are some questions concerning the present and the future of the birding community. What does the lack of minorities in the birding community teach us about birders? How will non-birders feel welcome into the birding community if there is no proper representation of minorities? A new generation of young birders. How are we contributing and advocating for diversity among the future generation of young birders? A birder doesn't have to dress the same or have the same color of skin or be the same age to become birders. Birding is for everyone. Birding is for those who love watching birds, love being outdoors in nature, and who cherish their beauty and purpose that it brings joy to them. But most importantly, introducing and bringing awareness of birds to others is one of the best gifts you can do for birds. Making more non-birders aware of the birds around them will help them respect and care for the environment. It will also inspire more environmental careers in the future. I strongly believe this. There are so many benefits of a diverse birding community. Representation of minorities in birding and nature-related professional careers. Exposure to birds and nature contributes to the health of kids mentally and physically. Brings awareness of environmental stewardship among minorities, especially in struggling communities. Contribution of several birding experiences and birdwatching ID tips among birders, and fellowship and friendship. It is important to reach schools and communities that are socially, economically disadvantaged. Unlike top high-performing school districts that have the finances and resources to bring high-quality education to their students, many low-performing school districts struggle to get their students to excel in the programs they are only able to financially support in their schools. I encourage you to search and bring birding to the schools in your community that need a birding and nature club in their school. you'll be shocked to find several schools in need. The Texas Blue Jay Project strives to reach as many schools and communities throughout Texas. Here are some suggestions and ideas how to bring birding to youth in rural and urban areas that are highly minority populated. Free rural and urban bird walks. Offer free weekly bird walks for families at rural and urban city parks in close to socially economically disadvantaged schools. Ask the school principal if you can promote your bird walk at their school with handing out a promotional flyer. Introduction to birding gear. Bring several types of birding gear like a spotting scope, bird field guidebooks, binoculars, notepads, so the kids can try them out. Kind of like a show and tell event. How to bird without birding gear. Teach the students the skills to birding by ear and learn the bird shapes and sizes of common backyard birds. And bird by ear and sight. Teaching them that there are other ways to bird makes birding more interesting. Present backyard birds and basic bird watching presentations to low income and disadvantaged schools and communities. Teach about their local birds they get in their area. Include spring, fall, and winter bird migrants. They also like to learn what other wildlife they can find out in nature. Have a fun bird quiz after the bird presentation for the students. Hand out bird stickers, bookmarks, or a homemade, easy-to-do bird art craft for answering correct. Many attendees enjoy participating in a door prize drawing. The Texas Blue Jay Project will occasionally host a bird book door prize drawing or a bird goodie gift bag prize drawing after the bird presentation. The door prize drawings are always selected after the presentation. Host birding day events at low income or disadvantaged schools and communities. During the early spring is usually the best time to host birding events. There will be plenty of spring bird migrants for the students to see and learn. Come up with some fun and wacky names for your birding event. This might help you bring more excitement and people to your birding event. I remember a couple of years ago, I once did a backyard birding presentation program at local libraries called The Real Angry Birds. Just with this title, it brought in so many families to my birding presentation. Creating young birders clubs in schools and communities is the best method of enriching youth to becoming birders. Weekly Young Birders programs with bird and nature-related educational topics with fun birding activities will make your Young Birders Club successful. Back in 2015, when my mom and I spoke to the Travis Audubon Society director at that time about us wanting to start a Travis Audubon Society Young Birders Club, we would have different bird classes weekly or sometimes twice a month. At these Young Birders Club meetings, I would teach about their different bird families and our migrant birds in our area at several city parks around town. Afterwards, I would lead the group to a bird walk at a city park that the birds that we just learned about were present. This helped them be able to use their new bird knowledge to the test on their birding identification skills. My mom is the crafty one. She would come up with all these cool arts and crafts for the kids to make. The crafts were done after the bird walks. Our Young Birders Club meetings would last 1 to 2 hours. We would also have expert guest speakers speak to the kids about particular birds, plants, trees, anything nature related. We always had their parents join us and supervise their child at every Young Birders meeting or event. It was special to see the entire families grow and become birders together. I had mentioned in a previous slide about the Texas Blue Jay Project Bird Book Drive and how to get one started in your community. It is important to start an ornithology library for low-income and highly minority schools for them to start their young birders clubs and nature clubs at their schools. Get your whole community involved with your mission. I am not as crafty as my mother. I will provide her an idea that would be pretty cool to do at community events, and she will start working on her creative crafts. Here were some arts and crafts we would have for the kids to make at community events and school events. Bird face mask. Draw some creative or realistic bird face mask or bird face beaks and have the kids decorate and design their own bird face mask with artificial feathers to give it a more bird look. Bird paper mobiles. Make cutouts of bird silhouettes of all different sizes and flight patterns in multicolored or design pattern paper. You need yarn or string and tape to put the bird paper mobile together. Bird silhouettes for windows. This is a fun way of educating the kids on how bird window collisions happen and how to prevent it. Cut out all types of bird patterns out of construction paper, only cut out a thick outline of the bird pattern, leaving the inside bird pattern hollow. Then cut square shapes of different colors of decoration tissue paper. Have the kids glue the colored tissue square papers on the thick outline of the bird pattern construction paper. Use a paper hole puncher to make a hole on the top of the bird pattern and use string to make a loop so they can hang it. Or they can just tape it on their window instead of making a hole or using a string. This should look like a paper window sun catcher. Bird paper beaks. Use yellow color cardstock paper to make a bird beak origami. Bird finger puppets. Cut out bird face patterns like a blue jay or northern cardinal and have the kids color them and paste them on construction paper. Cut them out and roll them into finger size to create your bird finger puppets. Bird nests. Use artificial sticks, artificial leaves, artificial eggs to make bird nests at your hosting table at your community event. Pre-dye the artificial eggs to different colors of common birds, for example, light bluish for house finches. Use a Sharpie to make the spots on the artificial eggs. Have the kids build the bird nest according to the photograph photo of the bird you are showing them, for example, the house finch, and have them select the eggs that will match the size and the color of the bird that it would look like. This will teach kids how to understand the ways birds make their nests and help them identify bird eggs. Bird ID matching game. I had a bird figurine bird ID matching game. I have Velcro on the back of the names of the birds, and the kids had to match them to the correct bird. I have provided here some birding resource links that I found very useful. The Merlin Birding ID app. It's a free app you can download on your phone, which is a birding identification app that allows you to identify any birds you see, especially in your backyards or your city or state parks. Then there's the Audubon Bird Guide, which is pretty much similar to the Merlin ID app, but shows more birds. And then the All About Birds, which goes more in detail about the facts and the history of the birds and shows all the birds in all plumages and ages. And they also show the sounds and the migration routes of these birds. And eBird, which is a really great citizen scientist website where you can people keep track of all the birds that have been seen around the world. I recommend these links to schools and communities. They are kid-friendly and have plenty of information about birds and the ways kids can participate in citizen scientists for birds. Here are some more kid-friendly resources. This can help you find kid-friendly binoculars and gear. At the Audubon website, There's kid-friendly binoculars, which they'll give you a list of all the binoculars and gear that are friendly for kids to use. Also, the Audubon website has kid-friendly birding field guidebooks, which are all bird field guidebooks that are easier for kids to use. And they even have their own ways of designing their own birding notepads and journal books. If you would be like a more detailed information on all the birding tools, arts and crafts, and birding resources that I spoke about, please send me an email at thetexasbluejayproject@gmail.com, and I will be happy to email you more details. Well, we are at the end of our presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it and learned some new ideas on how to spark a love of birding to young minorities. I have listed my information if you are interested in contacting me to give a bird presentation at your school or organization. Thank you again.
Sebastian, we have lots of questions for you in the chat. You have spurred not only questions, but a whole conversation, and people are very excited about everything you're sharing. So thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to start just at the beginning, and we'll see how many we get through. But the first is from Rink, and she starts with, not a question, just a comment. I'm so inspired. Great ideas I can do with our Girl Scout Council. So.
Thank you.
And then Amy Kosarek, her question is, besides schools, what are other ways I can reach minority groups? Who should I partner with? I can only think of churches.
Well, you can also partner with libraries and schools, and also try to or the city events. Because usually at every city, they have events for families for weekends. So if you contact the director who hosts the city events, you should try to ask them about birds so they can encourage more kids and minorities into birding. It's one of the ways you can attract more people into birding rather than just doing it in schools.
Great, and I think that leads really well into our next question from Sasha Francis, who asks, how do you find or attract these diverse audiences? Where do you advertise these events? We are hoping to connect with and attract more diverse audiences to our events.
I pretty much will search where there's around Texas, the state of Texas, where there's really a need for birding, where it's a poor side of town, where nobody's familiar with birds, and really that's where I go to advertise about my bird walks and my bird presentations, so I can inspire the community to go look at birds.
Great. We've got one from AYRW, the program coordinators, and they ask, do you have any tips for distance learning activities about birds?
For tips about, does that mean like virtual bird?
Yeah, I think so. So if you've been doing anything virtually, which I know you have been doing some virtual stuff.
Usually I've heard some people do virtual birding, but if you do like bird talks, but you send an email for that community in that city about doing like a basic bird talk of the basic backyard birds, you can do it in a Zoom meeting where people will log in and they'll be able to hear what you're teaching them about birds.
Kim Ogden asks, Sebastian, what activities would you suggest we use as fun attention-getting activities to reduce intimidation and pique interest in a club? And then she also asks, could you explain what you did for the Angry Birds activity?
So the Angry Birds was really what I did is I used birds that are like the characters from the Angry Birds, but used the real life birds. Like the main character is a male cardinal. So I would put like the character, and then I'll draw, and then there's a picture of the actual cardinal, and that's how I teach people about the backyard birds, by just simply using Angry Birds to help them out. And then ways to help people get without being intimidated about going out in the nature is to make the birding programs or nature programs more welcoming for students, especially minorities, by taking it more basic with them, learning the basic skills of birding or just being out in nature, period. Looking at the animals, it can be like bugs or insects, or it can even be looking at squirrels even. As long as it's nature related, that's a good way to get minorities interested in birding.
So Nancy Heron, her question is, do you have sponsors for your activities? Sounds like the events and clubs are free to the participants.
No, I do not have any sponsors. My mom and dad are just my sponsors. Just my parents. But I don't have any sponsors.
Well, maybe you might get some sponsors from today. You never know. So Amy Kosarik asks, I don't know how to phrase this, but I'm Hispanic and look white. I'm worried that Black and Hispanic minority children won't see birding as something for them when I create a group and teach. Should I partner with other adults and birders of color that look like them?
Yes, that would be a great way to encourage more minorities into birding by having a birder that's a minority. Because then if the minority birder is birding, then that means that it's safe and easy for everyone to do it, rather than it being intimidating them.
We have lots of great presentations. Thank you so much. Keep up the birding. But now we have a question. What part of Texas are you from?
I'm from Huddle, Texas, which is a small town that's kind of like outside of Austin. So it's close to Pflugerville. That's where Huddle is at. I live right now here in Huddle. And this is filmed right here in my house.
I think we all understand that right now. Sasha asks, do you put up flyers in apartment buildings at all?
No, I just put flyers at parks around the city, the community in the town that I'm gonna give the bird walks at, and bird presentations, and at libraries as well.
And one last question from Nancy, wanting to know if you would be willing to do some of your bird sounds for the group.
Yes, I'll be happy to do any bird sounds if you have any requests.
Ooh, do we have any requests?
I can make an owl sound.
That's a great one to start with.
This is a barn owl.
Someone asked if you could demo pitching, please.
Oh, pitching, that's when if you see a group of birders and they're right by a tree, they make a sound that's like, that sound is supposed to be used because it sounds like a feeder frenzy. So usually it sounds like a bunch of like sparrows fussing at a feeder, and that's what attracts the birds to come over because they hear the commotion. And that's how you can get like good looks at small bird, mainly smaller birds like warblers, sparrows. A lot of the little birds like to jump around a lot. It's an easier way to get to see them.
Rink says, thank you. I'd heard about the sound, but didn't know how to make it myself. So yeah. Okay, we've got
I have another bird sound. It's a common portwheel. It's a common portwhole.
We've got some requests for any warbler sounds.
Of course, nothing better than trying to do our specialty, our golden cheek warbler.
And then a request for a blue jay.
Oh, our blue jay.
Well, thank you so much, Sebastian. Any final questions for Sebastian?
Oh, and then I have a final bird sound I'm going to make. It's a downy woodpecker.
Oh, that's a really good one. Well, Sebastian, I'm getting lots of thank yous, and I loved the presentation. And you did. Thank you so much for coming. This was fantastic. I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Coles.
Yeah, this has been a really great presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I will be, we did